Hi everybody, welcome to week 5, which is research management. It's probably a bit of a dry topic compared to some of the other things we've been doing, but necessary, so let's get on with it. I guess this is all about being productive as researchers, and this topic that is, and you know from your studies what habits are best for you, what habits aren't good for you, the times of day that are good for you to work, those sorts of things. So as I go through this, I guess what I'm doing is going through some generic things, but of course your style is important in this, and some things will suit you, some things won't. I guess I'm just going through the range of considerations which are to do with research management in a sort of formal way. So bear with me in that, and we'll go through that. And I guess that those questions though, what techniques and strategies are good for you and work for you, when are you most productive, are also things to be explicit about and think about as you're doing your planning around your research. So just as an overview of what I'm going to cover today in terms of managing our thinking and doing, is I guess the first thing is, what do you do when you get lost? And one of those things in regards to our research is, what was the question again? What is it that I'm doing? It's inevitable that we're going to get lost, wonder what we're doing, wonder why we're doing it, end up in one of those little holes somewhere, but that's the job of our research question, of our concern, of thinking back to why did I start this in the first place, is to go back and sort of pick up the thread again of where it is you're going. So if you get lost, find the thread. It's your research question that's going to provide it, and off we go again. Dust yourself off. We're going to talk about time today, so project plan. We're going to talk about managing stuff. Sometimes these are virtual stuffs, sometimes they're real stuffs. A little bit about writing, and not so much about making. I'm not a maker, so I'm going to trust that the makers know their practices and their ways. I guess it's more having some tools to think about managing that within the whole scope of the research, because I guess the making is now embedded in the research. But I've got more to say about writing because it's more what I know about and my practice. And I guess the other thing I just wanted to talk briefly about is looking after yourself and others. So let's get going on that. Your project plan, your research plan, let's call it that, your research plan, in terms of a timeline, which some people talk about a project timeline or a research timeline in terms of a Gantt chart. You can Google that to see what one looks like. It's sort of like boxes and arrows and all sorts of things. But all of this will come from your methodology in a sense. So your question is going to be answered by a methodology, and your methodology, along with your theoretical, I guess, perspective and approach, and your content is going to give you basically all the tasks that you need to do. In addition to those tasks, I guess there's going to be some milestones. So they're going to be the significant events, performance, exhibition date, submission date for thesis, draft chapters, all those sorts of things, assignments for research methods, you know, all the little bits and pieces, but the definite dates with an outcome, I guess, are your milestones. The list of tasks has this fancy name, or can be given a fancy name in project management jargon, of the work breakdown structure. And it's just as I say, a list of tasks. And sometimes there's tasks and subtasks. So, for example, one of your tasks might be to wrap your head around what grounded theory is, because that's going to be your methodology. So, you know, one of your tasks. So that could be an overall task, and you could break that down. Do a Google Scholar search. Find out what the key texts are, maybe from your supervisor or somebody who knows. Go and obtain the texts, do the reading, do a few annotations, take some notes, and then write a summary of that and develop it into a few paragraphs or more for your methodology. There's a list of tasks under grounded theory as your methodology. The same could be done for all of the substantive areas of knowledge that you need to cover. So there's one set of tasks. I guess there's going to be other tasks that you've got as well, depending on the nature of your research. Might be conducting interviews, transcribing, coding, analysing. It might be doing some, you might have some preliminary experiments with some materials, but there's a definite date that you need to be working towards, because there's going to be, your friend's got a wood-fired kiln out in the scrub somewhere, and there's a big firing happening. You've got to work towards that date. You've got a performance on, you need rehearsals, and so on. All of that type of stuff is what goes into a work breakdown structure and these milestones that you need to meet. And so a research plan is a really useful thing, because it's something that at least you can get your head around. Wow, how long have I got to do? If you work backwards from your submission date or an exhibition date, a performance date, and come back with rehearsals or submitting a draft to your supervisor and all that type of thing, and giving them a month to get back to you, or however long they need, then you're going to start working up to, I guess, having a good idea of how you're going to need to progress. You might have to have an ethics application, all those sorts of things. So managing your time can start with getting organised around what it is that you need to do. And at this stage it's going to be preliminary and it's going to be open to change, but get a pencil and paper out, get your rubber out, rub stuff out, change it around, move it about. Maybe you could create this in a document, who knows. There's a few dates that are important, of course. I've already mentioned these: thesis, exhibition, performance dates, exegesis, submission. The ones that are usually fixed are for those people producing a written thesis, and in the School of Arts and Social Sciences, written theses are due on the 1st of November. For people with exegeses, typically it's 2 to 3 weeks before the opening of the exhibition, the end-of-year exhibition. For performances, it may be the same. For people who are interested in going on to do a PhD, typically, if you're producing a written thesis, you may well have an earlier date, the 1st of October, for your submission, if it's the case that you want to apply for a research stipend. That is the scholarship that the government provides to PhD students. So just bear those dates in mind. Also remember that the thesis is an assignment. And this applies to everybody. It doesn't apply to PhD and Masters so much, although you can also apply for extensions, but that's a different process. But for honours students, remember that the thesis is an assignment attached to the final honours research unit, and therefore, like any assignment, you can apply for special consideration for an extension. So bear that in mind as you go through. To construct a project plan, a research plan, you can use Word, you can use Excel, paper and pencil. Some people have suggested in-class and online tools such as Trello. I haven't used it, but apparently it's great. It's on your phone, on your iPad, that type of thing. You can carry it around with you. Remember always that you want to make life easy, so reward yourself when you reach milestones, and also plan for some time out. It's really important in research to have that time out. First of all, because you need time just to, gather your thoughts, recreate yourself. But also, thinking thrives on having a bit of space. So those walks on the beach are really important. Moving on to managing your stuff. So, as you're going along, you're going to be producing lots of stuff. A lot of it, for those people doing writing, which most people are doing, sort of that's the main production, is going to be computer files. So, if you're one of those people who has everything on the desktop, now's the time to think, maybe I should start using some folders and some subfolders. A folder that's for your exegesis or your thesis, and some subfolders for each chapter. Maybe a folder for images that you're going to use for each chapter or for the thesis as a whole. Think about how you name your files, chapter 1, version 01. And then when you get your first draft of that, you want to revise it, change it to version 02, save it as, and work on that document. So you've always got a fallback if something goes wrong along the way. You've always got that earlier version of a file to work with. And get used to naming those things clearly. And the other thing, of course, is to back up constantly. Consider the cloud for that, or else, it's really easy to get some good disk space using, one of those portable drives. I'm looking for one around me. I haven't got one, but, portable drive that can take a terabyte of data, even a little USB stick, that type of thing. Have numerous backups. Use a backup facility on your computer and make sure it's doing it every day at least. The cloud's really useful, of course, because once it's there, then it's always available and it's not going to get burnt in a fire, whatever it is that that happens to stuff. But yeah, really important. Make sure you've got a backup. Another part of managing your stuff is, of course, your bibliography. So some people like to use bibliographic software and some people don't. So it's really up to you. I find it really useful, and my advice would be that if you're going to go on and do a PhD or some research down the track, use it. Because this is going to be one of the tools of your trade as you go on in your research, and you'll be glad that you did. I didn't when I was doing my research, and since then I miss that. I've got a whole lot of missing information that I'd love to have access to. So start something, either EndNote, which SCU provides free, download from the library. It interfaces with Word. It works quite well. I don't mind it at all. But there's also web-based applications, Mendeley, Zotero. There's others as well that you can use. Some people don't use them, and that's okay. But one of the great things about them is that you can attach PDFs, downloaded PDFs from journals and so forth, scans that you've done, all sorts of material, and it just, the software manages that for you and can insert it as a reference into your document as you're writing it. Alternatively, you can manage that, of course, yourself in the old-fashioned way, which is fine. But think about it. There's an investment in time in this bibliographic software, and so I guess that's why I never did it when I was starting out, but I wish I had just invested a little bit of time, because it would have saved me heaps later on. And so, as I say, it's just something to think about. Depending on what degree you're doing, you will have some assistance with costs. If you're doing honours, it's $150 for your whole research. You can only claim it once, so it's sort of like saving up $150 worth of receipts for everything that could be a justifiable cost for your research, excluding equipment, because unfortunately if you buy equipment, this is going to apply for PhD and Masters as well, if you buy equipment using university money, then the university deems that it's the university's equipment, not yours. So if you're prepared to give it back, that's okay, but you might be thinking about materials, books, printing costs, all sorts of things, printer cartridges, you name it, consumables of that sort. PhD and master students, larger degree, more money to play with. Consult with those who administer this stuff, and you'll find out what it is that you could reasonably claim for. For all of us, writing is a key aspect of our research. So managing our writing is important, and we've all put it off, and it demotivates us, and it doesn't help us get on with it. The thing that motivates us is doing something, doing little bits. So what I'd say is that managing your writing is about writing. So number one, write. That's the main thing. Put writing into your plan, including time for supervisor feedback and revision. Remember about having drafts ready and having people who are willing to proofread for you. But I think the main thing is to think about writing strategies, and one of the writing strategies that works for me is this idea of turbocharging your writing. It comes from this consultancy group called Thinkwell. Often the university has courses run by them, but they've also got an online support materials that you can access. And this is sort of the nuts and bolts of one of the things that they talk about, which is the turbocharging your writing. And it all starts, as with the research plan, with a plan. This is a plan in dot points, which is the story of what it is that you want to write. So you've got a chapter that you want to write, you plan it out in dot points. The key to it is that you pitch it at a 10-year-old. Now, I don't really know exactly what that means, but I guess what it means is you're going to explain this to somebody who's intelligent, who understands the world, but who you can't assume a whole lot of jargon and knowledge with. So, what's the story for a 10-year-old in dot points? So there's your plan, once you've dotted that out. Now, what you need to do is fill in each of those dot points. That's your plan. So type all that out, and then turn off your browser, your email, all distractions, and every day, preferably first thing, commit to 20 minutes of writing. So this is writing in snacks. And the idea of this, as I said earlier, is that what we're motivated by is achievement. When we feel like we've achieved something, we want to do more. When we procrastinate, it often feeds on itself and we procrastinate more. So this is about getting stuff done. So every day, 20 minutes of writing, first thing, but not for more than 2 hours. So that's sort of when our brain gets a bit tired. So just sort of committing to the 20 minutes is enough. If it goes for 2 hours, yippee, What you do at the end of each writing session is finish with some dot points about what to write next, because usually when we finish, we know where it has to head next. We're just tired, we've run out of time, all those sorts of things have happened. We've been interrupted. So, quick, write down some dot points about where to next, and then the next day, start with the dot points. Don't go back and edit, don't go back and reread, except maybe a paragraph just to get ourselves in the mood of where we're headed. But use those dot points to start again. And that's the process of doing this, turbocharging your writing using snack writing. Now, what happens in this process is that You're always getting something done. It's going to motivate you. One of the things that I think we'll talk about is how waiting for inspiration is just procrastination. Writing, as many writers will tell us, is hard work. And we have to write even when we don't feel like writing, because that's our job. We're researchers and we're writers. So that's what we do. We're going to concentrate by using that dot point strategy at the end of each day by not going over old stuff. Often, when we write and we start from the beginning again, we spend 80% of our effort going over old stuff, not generating new stuff. The idea of this process is to get that first draft, and once you've got the first draft, then it's time to edit, but not before. The good thing about doing this in the morning is that if you've got some dot points of where you need to go next, but you know that you need to do some reading in order to actually cover this stuff, then that's something you can do that afternoon or that evening. You can do some reading for the next day's writing so that the next day you go into it and get going. And one of the things that isn't writing, this is all about new words, is editing and referencing and putting in those references. So, you can quote and you can do all that and use your articles and do that type of thing, but remember that you're after new words. So just put in a note of a reference and come back later on at another time. It's sort of about getting words down, even if they feel like sort of crap words. Get them down there and keep it moving. Keep that writing going. Keep that, what is it? Anyway, I'm thinking about Rawhide and the Sex Pistols did a version of it, or was it? Anyway, let's move on. All that stuff's for the afternoon. So that's turbocharging your writing. That's about getting work done. If you did 200 words every day in that 20 minutes, that's 1,000 words a week. Over 5 weeks, that's 5,000 words. That's an exegesis. That's a chapter. It's or more than a chapter. So think about it in these ways. It's part of that work breakdown structure that I mentioned earlier too, to factor in this type of thing. Maybe 200 words a day is a good target. It's a conservative target, but it gives you an idea of how long it's going to take you to write a draft, and then you might think about how much time you need to factor in for editing. So they're the sorts of things to do. One of the things that I didn't put on the slide and I'll just mention now too is that I was down at the library today and somebody said, look, I haven't put pen to paper, but I've been doing a lot of reading. And one of the things I'd also say is make sure that you're always taking notes. Have a notebook, have your research book where you take notes. Use that to write out quotes, useful things like that, to plot the argument of a paper, to summarise things, and try and use that as much as you can for your writing as well. Taking notes is really important as part of your reading for your writing. So just a little thing that I was thinking about and I haven't put there. Look, you know about referencing. There's standard SCU supported styles, APA and Harvard, but of course referencing is discipline specific. So talk to your supervisor about the referencing style that you need to be using and use that. Set your EndNote up to use it all the time. It's all happening in front of your eyes. With the library, if there are resources that you need, make sure and the library doesn't have them, take full advantage of document supply. This is the interlibrary loan system. It's open to you. Takes often about 2 weeks for them to get something in, but sometimes it's shorter. You have to remember why you actually ordered something, but keep on top of your literature, the latest things, by using the library document supply. Make appointments with a librarian if you're getting stuck about finding literature. They'll help you search and think about search terms, think about databases to search in, that type of thing. Okay, I guess the other key part, most important part of your research is you. No you, no research. No healthy you, no healthy research, in that sense of feeling the best you can for doing it. So look after yourself and those around you. One way of keeping yourself and others on track, your peers who are also doing research, is to think about a peer support group. This is a group that might commit to meeting, say, every 2 weeks to talk about research in particular. That's the focus of this discussion. Might be 3 to 4 people. You might decide that at each meeting, which is going to last an hour, everyone gets 15 minutes to talk about their research, and just let it out to people who understand what's going on, what this process is about. Or you might decide that someone might take the lead each week. You give half an hour to someone and 10 minutes to the others, because you're going to give some substantial time every now and then to somebody who needs a little bit more thinking through about an issue. But it's about reciprocal participation, having some equality in the process. It's in addition to your supervisor, but it's sort of amongst peers, so you can sort of talk in that way that you'd like to amongst yourselves. Sometimes you might think about having a facilitator, but it's a really good thing. You can do this virtually. Use an application like Zoom, for example, or Skype. If you think that this would be really useful for you, start thinking about this now during research methods, while you've got people around you who you might be able to hook up with and organise a peer support group. Of course, there's also others in your life. There's your supervisor. I've just mentioned here that in the School of Arts and Social Sciences, your supervisor will be allocated 45 hours in total for your supervision. Or if you've got a co-supervisor, that time's going to be split between them. So bear that in mind. Don't worry about it. Because it's up to them to manage that time. But if you sort of get the sense that they're limiting you, this may be one of those reasons. Most of us as supervisors are more than generous with our time. We love research. We love having research students. It's what's really interesting about our work, and so we're dedicated to you and to your research. So I guess that's why I'm saying, don't be concerned about time. Do what, request the time that you need, but also be mindful that there are constraints, obviously, on this. To spread the load, you can have critical readers. These might be people that read well, will give you some fearless feedback, some critical feedback, tell you what they like. They might be outside the discipline area, so that, they are looking at it with those fresh eyes. So there might be a critical audience that you're sort of dealing with in a way, these critical readers. You might also like to contact some specialist academics who as an honours student, you can do this type of thing, and you'll be surprised at who will respond to you and say, sure, I'm happy to read a chapter, or I'm happy to read a draft. Though bear in mind that if you do that, you can't use those people as examiners later on, and maybe you want those same people for examiners. So just have a think about that. There's your peers, of course, and then there's your domestic supporters. Always keep them in mind. I know you are, but they're going to need to be a bit understanding, aren't they? Because honours is a challenging time. You need support as you're going through honours, and it's part of the whole deal. There's going to be tough times, and so just looking after yourself and the others around you is really important. That's why a peer support group's really good, because these are peers who understand what you're going through. So all of this has been really about this managing your research stuff, I guess, to me, is about maximising the enjoyment of this process, because this is a rare opportunity to focus in on research, whether you're doing honours, masters, PhD. This is a privilege that doesn't happen very often. This is beautiful time to immerse yourself in something, to do that thing which has been itching to be done. Frustrations are going to be inevitable, and that's why a plan's really useful, but it's also useful to be generous to yourself, to allow yourself to trip up, not get hard on yourself, but to get back on your feet, check in with your plan, check in with your research question, and get going again. Get onto that 20 minutes a day. Get into that 20 minutes a day. Right, remember what motivates you? It's doing stuff, not putting it off. And if pain persists, as sometimes it does, life intervenes, talk to your peers, talk to your support people, talk to your supervisor, whoever is the most appropriate, seek help, ask, always. Earlier the better. Sometimes it takes us a while to recognise that, but always ask. But in the end, you can make it through. You've got through your undergraduate degree. You've done well in that degree. And so you're capable of doing honours, and you can do this. So I guess it's just about getting in there and enjoying this process and making the most of it. So I guess that's the theme for this week of managing your research, is managing our research, managing the tasks that we need to do, and most of all, managing ourselves in that process. So that's it for topic 5, managing your research. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.